Hey everybody, thanks for bearing with us there for a minute. That's all on me. I had internet fun right at the last moment, so appreciate everybody's patience. I'm John Marchant from KipperTie, and we've got my business partner and colleague Fernando, and we've got Mikael Lubtchansky, who I'm sure a lot of you will know. He's surrounded by his creations there on screen. And oh, look at the perfectly cued. We've got Jared from Red with us as well. So yeah. I know this is going to be probably what everybody wants to know. So I'm going to ping it at Jared first of all, which is everybody wants their camera yesterday. How things look.
My inbox agrees with you.
Yeah.
So how much time do you want, the short answer or the long answer? I don't know how much time you guys have.
Well, I know it's complex, but
yeah, it is complicated. Yeah. So on the, I mean, you guys with the colored cameras are obviously a little bit special in a special group. And I created this, if we back up a little bit, the colored cameras were, as we entered the lockdown, and the Komodos were actually pretty close to entering that stormtrooper phase, but then the factory closed down and the engineers and everybody had to kind of figure out how to keep working, but work from home, which we adapted amazingly well. And these colored cameras cost probably 6 or 7 times more than we sold them for, but the feedback from them and your guys testing them is worth it times 100. And the engineers hate it. I mean, the business folks hate it. They're like, what do you mean we're sending cameras out to normal people? And I was like, trust me, the feedback and the testing we get from real people, real shooters, taking their own cameras, not just, loaners from Red or some kind of weird beta program. When it's their camera and they get to do whatever the hell they want with it, the feedback that we get is going to be worth months of pretending to test in a lab. And it proved to be exactly that. You guys nailed and hammered on these cameras right out of the gate. So that was great. And then meanwhile, while that was all happening, we entered phase 2 of our reopening after the virus. And that let a little bit more people back in manufacturing in our facility in Southern California, and gave us a little window of an opportunity to make that decision, which happened last week, of do we continue with the colored cameras, or do we have this window now that for us, the next phase when our factory's allowed to reopen completely happens next week after the July 4th holiday so far. Do we take that? Because what the other thing that's happening, as we had this kind of good news, we're on top of the virus. I mean, it's still there, but people are behaving and the numbers are going down. All of a sudden they started to spike again. So last week was really a kind of come to Jesus moment of, wow, holy shit, we have the opportunity or the challenge of there might be another lockdown here if the numbers seem to grow. So do we take it slow, or do we, once our factory opens, just get in and start making these stormtroopers as fast as we can? Because the feedback from you guys, again, that couldn't have happened without you guys banging on all these colored cameras. And I think you saw it from lots of you have had a few builds along the way. Mikael, thank you very much. I mean, this guy's a machine. He's putting out builds every day almost. We were at a point engineer-wise where, yeah, we can do it. We probably, I mean, there's a lot of risk associated, but we can do it if that's the right decision. And I didn't know, this isn't the first time. We usually do a stormtrooper program, a white camera program, to kind of get out. And this is before we release specs, before it even, you go to red.com right now and you don't even know what a Komodo is. So this is kind of just something I've always done because I know how valuable it is. And I started this little email list, and which has grown just off the chart. But so on the weekend, I said, okay, let's do it. Let's go Stormtrooper all the way. And so this week into next week, as we prep the factory, and I have Clark, who works with me at the studio here in stage 4. He's going to get everybody's information. I mean, people are emailing like crazy, and it's taken us a while to get back to everybody. But this week is kind of the week to communicate, get everybody their spot locked in. And then the following week is when we're just starting a full onslaught of building these stormtroopers. And it's really cool. It feels like since this is a studio only, this program, this entire colored and this white program really is just happening out of the studio with I have about 12 people here. It feels like the Red One days again. It feels like we just have no idea what we're doing. It's a total cluster. I should probably stop swearing so much, but it's a very,
We're not monetized.
it's a very seat of the pants program we have, but it feels really special. And so to answer your question, the long-winded way, they'll start to go out between, if all goes well, probably between not next week, but the following week after that into the following weeks after that. The list is getting pretty long, as you can imagine. So it'll just be people getting their space queue in line, and then, making them as fast as we can and then shipping them out. And then just hoping we'll make as many as we can until either the list gets fulfilled or we get shut down again. So kind of the answer to that.
Yeah, it's complex. I know it's
it is very.
We see a very small amount of it. Obviously, making products ourselves on a very different scale. But even on that scale, yeah, we've been doing the same thing. We're making stuff in my own workshop. We've got people working from home, taking complex and expensive tooling with them to try and make stuff happen, literally in a garage. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I guess, like you say, getting stuff out there, getting feedback early before we get to the production cameras, the black cameras. It's got to be worth it for you guys, and I think for a lot of people who aren't necessarily taking ownership of the camera, being on the sidelines and getting to see stuff, if they're serious, there's valuable information coming for them as well. It's not just the benefit that they get further down the line, it's that they get to see a little bit of well-filtered, well-thought-out information. Now,
I don't know about the well thought out, but
we're sitting here on YouTube where it's pretty easy for people to talk crap. So there's plenty of that too. But I think for the person who knows what they're looking at, it's valuable.
Yeah, no, that's the reality of it. And there's something authentic about that. And trust me, I get the same opposition even internally, is people, I'm always been transparent. I always say that we're customers. Jim and I, we started this because we're shooters. We're making this camera for ourselves and just kind of hope everybody likes them as we go along. And I think that it really, the thing in this lockdown, and I was talking to Fernando earlier, is it was, as horrible as it is, it was a really awesome opportunity for me to actually go out and start shooting again. I mean, I've shot more in the last 3 months than I have in the last 3 years, and that's important. And that's the other reason for, the stormtroopers, they're expensive to make. These aren't really full production, factory cameras. They're expensive. It's not a money thing for us to sell these cameras, but I know that how important it is for everybody in the creative space and as shooters to get out there and shoot, or you go crazy. I mean, we were about a week away myself from losing my mind from just kind of being stuck, but being able to, it's the blessing of being a shooter or a filmmaker is you can actually just take a camera and be safe and go shoot something. And there's something really therapeutic as the whole world feels like it's fallen apart. And you get to also document what's going on, which is important. It's incredibly important to be able to go, and not with just with the pandemic, you know, with the protest and everything else that happened in this world. It was really valuable for people to grab a camera and go and to shoot. And that's really one of the most exciting, personally, the most exciting parts of this Stormtrooper program is if we hit another lockdown, there'll be a lot of people with new cameras in their hands that get to learn how to shoot it and give them something to do to kind of cope with the current situation. And I think that's important. I really do think that that's important because it's challenging. It's a challenging time. You know, you got to keep busy.
I mean, it's interesting. I want to throw this over to Fernie for a second because he's been working with the camera a fair bit, and there's a couple of bits of material which we've been able to share with people. You know, this is a camera that you can actually pick up and go and shoot in that kind of difficult environment. And, you know, it has been difficult for a lot of different reasons to shoot, not least because you're having to work in a very limited way. You know, if this was the Red One that you just brought out right at this moment in this scenario, you know, we wouldn't be able to pick it up, grab it and just go and do. It's physically a totally different proposition. Fernie, just tell us a bit about the shoot you did up in London, just in terms of quantity of crew, how you kind of loaded out, how you packed out to go and do that.
Yeah, so I was just sort of talking to Jared earlier. I've never been so excited about the camera since the release of the Red One, with the Komodo coming out. And the biggest, you know, the biggest sell point for me is the small form factor, the low power consumption, the fact that you can just grab it. You know, in 10 minutes you can just shoot at the house, at the office, and just go and shoot something. Whether it's a riot or a documentary or just something very quickly off the fly, where, you know, we've got Monstros, Geminis, Heliums here at the office, but the go-to camera will always be picking up the Komodo as a self-shooter. I'll be shooting 10 times more on this camera than I will be on any other camera. And that not saying that any other camera is inferior, nowhere near inferior to this, but it's just the accessibility of the camera, and together with the revolver which we've got on here, so the internal ND is just such a quick run and gun camera to work with. So the shoot up in London, normally if I shoot on something like, you know, typically on a Gemini, I'd at least have 3 or 4 crew with me to shoot something like that. I shot it with myself and Bryce, who was just carrying a tripod for me, bless him. But I mean, I had it all in a low pro bag like this. Batteries, lenses, EF lenses, 2 mounts. So an RF to Canon mount, an RF to PL, had a couple of Supremes, 3 Sigma art lenses, media, all in one backpack. So I you know, and the card reader and my laptop, so I only had 2 cards with me, so I could back up the media as I went, because it was just so easy. It's just on the fly. And
you're a studio in a backpack there, really, aren't you?
Basically, I was ditting, shooting.
It makes, and that stuff was phenomenal. It was so, and that's another thing that I love, you know, when we would release cameras before, and especially when we used to do the whole NAB circus thing, you know, it was shoot this big, crazy, expensive feature film looking test footage and blow it out there and get everybody excited. And I changed that. I started changing that a few years ago because it's not really real. I mean, the camera, all of our cameras are capable of taking phenomenal footage. If you give the Red One today to somebody incredibly, I mean, look at, you know, Social Network. You give that camera to somebody talented, they can take a pretty image. So I like the idea of, again, making these cameras available to people in the test phase with all the ugliness and the image anomalies and the weird stuff going on. Again, because when we get that feedback and see how people shoot, it helps us lock in. We didn't decide on the black point for Komodo until last Friday. So you get to see this, and you know, a lot of people, when you guys posted that footage, I had no idea. It's not like I'm sitting here, you know, everybody, you have to sign NDAs and don't release shitty looking footage or great looking footage. I've got to prove everything, which most companies do.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that I saw that stuff come out when everybody else did. And the good and the bad, there's no kind of controlling that because that's real life. As you learn, especially it's a new camera, and you get this camera and you have to learn how to use it. And I did a few things on the Komodo where your exposure, I created this different kind of goalpost method of judging highlights and stuff that you have to get used to. You know, you have to learn how to use it. So am I blowing out? Am I not? What's the exposure range? And it's a new tool that you have to learn. And I like to share that with the world because a lot of people are so excited about this camera. I like to share that process with people because it's educating and they learn, okay, wow, that footage is all blown out. Why is that stuff all blown out? Is there something wrong with the camera? Well, there kind of was at one point because we were still working on where do we put the middle point. But also it's like, oh shit, I didn't realize that this is how I'm supposed to read the exposure meters now because they're new. And oh, I didn't know that my monitor has a LUT now because it's not a red monitor, and everybody's monitor, you know, you're using a small HD, you're using whatever other monitor you might have, the Porta-Keys, there's a bunch of great little ones. They all look differently, and you just kind of have to learn that. And I like bringing along everybody for the ride, even though you're going to get a ton of people saying, what the hell is wrong with you guys and why are you doing this? I think that's the way that as we are a community-based company, it's better for everybody to experience and just witness. And if you don't like it, just close your eyes. Officially, Komodo doesn't officially exist. I mean, if you call 1-800-RED, they'll be like, I don't know, Jared's just doing his thing up at the studio. Just go email him or talk to him. So if you don't like watching it, then just close your eyes and wait for the black cameras to come out, and there'll be, you know, a bunch of pretty images and specs and everything else you need to know. But this is just, you know, it really is a part of me, and it just like it was a part of Jim, and I just like doing it, and I don't care if people don't like it and if people get upset by it. Really.
That's good. I mean, the thing is, you talk about it as a
Uh-oh.
It's a huge part of.
Oh, we got him back.
Oh, you got me. Sorry, guys.
Repeat that last.
Yeah. So you're saying community is a big deal, and you know, a part of that is evident with the people from the community who have kind of come into the fold, like we have, like Mikael has as well. You know, we start out as users. We get involved and we get more involved, and you know, and we you know, end up in a lot of cases working hand in hand. I mean, Mikael, I don't know if a lot of people necessarily know. I think they're aware of your app. Do you want to just give us the briefest kind of version of your journey to where you are now? Because I think people might easily just assume, oh, he's a coder, he's a programmer.
No, which I'm not. Yeah, I was just like making very like 6 years ago or something, or maybe I start with the red one. I got a red one, and the workflow was so primitive at the time, so I had to kind of do my own small Apple script and stuff just to be, be able to go from Final Cut back to Red Cine and do the very early stuff at the beginning when there was no XML import, and we just had to rely on the EDL, and I was like transforming the names of the clips back to the red name that was longer than what the EDL at the time could save inside the file, which was very primitive. So I did a first Apple script just to be able to do this and put them on Reducer, and then people started downloading them and finishing their film with the script. So I did another one just for me, and then suddenly when I think the Dragon came out, or maybe it was the Epic X or something, I was using a small app that was making like PDF catalogs with just one thumbnail from the clips. And this didn't work with the new sensor. And the guy making this app was like doing something else. So I say, okay, I'll do it myself. So I started putting and looking at the Red SDK, which was like Chinese to me at the time. I was just like, I won't be able to decode anything, but I just spent like a few hours on this, and then understood how I was able to decode a file and make a thumbnail and put it there and read the metadata with Redline and put it also in the PDF, and did that app called FullCat that lets you catalog your day of shoot and being able to refer to the best clip that you've got on that day without going through all the rushes. And again, put that online with a PayPal link, and people started buying the app and using it. And on set, they say, oh, I look good now on set because I got your PDF, and everyone loves it. And I give it to the producer, to the script supervisor, or to the client. And they hire me again because I had this PDF that no one else had. And I was happy with that, and was just making like pocket money and something. And like 6 years ago, Jared saw it on a big shoot with Dino that's showing the app. And then he shoot me an email and say, oh, I love what you did. You should come to NAB and show your software there. And by the way, we have a new SDK that will be coming out at NAB for guys like you. And I thought Jared maybe thought I was a real developer at a company or something, which was obviously not the case. It was just me doing like small coding on my end. And since he gave me the SDK before everyone else, and I had this camera on my desk and the cable, I started like saying, everyone, don't disturb me, I'll be busy in the next few weeks. And I just dived in and did this UI to be able to put all the setting that was in the camera at the time. And there was a long list of settings, but I thought that this one needed to be there, and this one I don't need because I'm not using that in but I'm shooting. So I was able to kind of reshuffle all the features that were in the camera and put it into a different UI. And since I'm a user and not an engineer, suddenly it was like an easy thing to use for people, and it really catch up very quickly. I was surprised. I thought it would be just a one thing that I do, and like a few months later, someone else would do a better app or whatever. But then people just email me and say, oh, it's good on the computer, but I need the same thing on my phone. And then the next summer, I started doing the app for the iPhone, and then Red released some Wi-Fi enabled camera, and then it went crazy after that.
So the big transition now is what we're looking at is not Foolcontrol. This is Redcontrol, but
yeah, so
it's Foolcontrol.
It's Foolcontrol.
Just call it.
We know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Make no mistake about it. We have nothing to do with it. This is all Mikael.
Yeah.
You know, we just have to change the name a little bit, but I will always call it Foolcontrol. And I don't want to de-emphasize how critical that moment that Mikael has. It's actually, this is the perfect group because you both were part of that initial. But I remember seeing what Mikael was doing on, it was on that, I think it was Mordecai, some big Johnny Depp movie, Hill's massive crew. And there's Dino in his, and I don't know if everybody knows Dino, but he is the DIT of all DITs. He's got like 8 carts around him, air conditioning in his little DIT village. And he just is the guy that kind of always figures stuff out really early. And he showed me what Mikael was doing. And at the time we had our own little version, and there was one of the biggest faults we had at Red at the beginning of our company was we tried to do everything ourselves, because when we first were developing the Red one, nobody would talk to us. Everybody thought we were out of our mind and no, we're not going to help you. Good luck. You guys are nuts. And what do you know about cameras? Blah, 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 blah. So we kind of had this thing ingrained. Oh my God, we're going to have to do everything ourselves. We're going to have to make our sensors, our ASICs, our software on both in the camera, the firmware, and the software to decode, the red rocket, da 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 da. So we had this mentality of we have to do this all ourselves, not because we were going to be better than everybody, but just because nobody would help us. And of course, there was that moment where I saw what Mikael was doing, and we were working on something kind of similar, which was and trust me, a team of engineers was working on this. And I'm like, wow, this one guy is doing, who is a shooter, you know, Dino gave me the background that he knew of Mikael. One guy doing this for the right reason. It's not to get rich, and it's not to, you know, take over the world. It was, he's a shooter, needs a tool. That's why we started Red. So that I literally went, once Dino showed me that, and this must have been 2 o'clock in the morning. I went out to a U-Haul truck, a big box truck on set. I called Brent Carter, who's over here right now. I called Brent Carter and a few other people, and I'm like, we have to let the third parties in, and we have to let people start helping us with this stuff. And literally that moment, that night, was when the third party program began. And that's when I called you, John. And of course, Mikael was already there. And I think we had Frame.io before it was Frame.io. But we started to embrace the community to do exactly what we were doing. And, you know, it really was an important transition in our company where we realized, wow, other people can obviously do this better than us, but it keeps it in the community and we all learn. I mean, with the Revolve and the filters and all the stuff you guys did at KipperTie, if we tried to do this ourselves, same with Foolcontrol, Komodo would be, not to mention the previous cameras, but Komodo would be another 6 months out and we'd probably do it wrong. You know, we do a lot of stuff wrong. And so it helps us, it helps you, and it helps the customer and the shooter, which ultimately is the goal. And hopefully we all can survive and make a little money off of doing so. But it really feels like we're all in this together, which is super cool to me.
Yeah, I think Komodo feels like another step on in that evolution, in terms of how streamlined you guys are being. You know, I know there are a few people who have been asking me, you know, will this accessory I've got, this other accessory that I've got from DSMC2, is it going to work? And to a degree, it feels like it's a bit of a harsh cutoff. But in another way, it does represent that focus of saying, okay, we're going to do what we're good at doing, and let other people do what they're good at doing.
Absolutely correct.
I mean, does it concern you at all in terms of the ability to share or not share some of that stuff from the DSMC2 line, or is your philosophy more about it being like a parallel companion thing?
Yeah, this is part of, and you know, before Red, I worked with Vision Research and Panasonic on the DVX100 and the HVX, and I had these little boot camps that I used to do under DVX User, which is a website I created, and a little community. And I'd give these boot camps, and I'd always get feedback from Panasonic or somebody that, you know, we didn't include this feature, or we didn't do this feature because of the camera before it, or it's too good, or, you know, this legacy thing. So making Komodo, you know, this is something that we actually discussed early on, and we had this motto with the Red One: obsolescence is obsolete. And a lot of people kind of took that as well, we're not, you know, we always let you upgrade, and you're going to have the same camera for the rest of your life, which of course is unrealistic. But it really was a statement about not protecting a legacy. So when we were doing Komodo, I mean, it was with the DSMC2, you know, going from Red 1 to DSMC2, you have to buy all new accessories and blah, 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 blah. For Komodo, it wasn't, okay, we have to make the monitors work. It's not going to be good. It's going to take too much power. We're going to have to lower the capability of the camera, but we have to take care of that legacy. It's just something that you make a much better product. You see, you know, obviously the RF mount didn't even exist when we started designing the Komodo. And when that came along, it was like, oh, you know, do we use our lens mount that we can change? Or do we use this new mount that Canon created, not, you know, a competitor? Do we use that because it's better? It's better. You guys all know my campaign for a new mount over the last few years, and they just checked all the boxes, and it really was something that was important, not to be able to say, okay, we gotta kind of reset, not look at the past, not look what we did. Same with batteries. I mean, we've been making our own batteries since we started, you know, V-Locks, and then we had those stupid little red volts, which just kind of sucked. The intention was right, yeah. But, you know, we realized pretty quick, we're not the best at making batteries. So, you know, we tested all the batteries. We tested the Sony batteries, the Canon batteries, Panasonic batteries, some third-party batteries, and the Canon ones had enough amps to get us to where we could actually run the camera. And I said this earlier, but, you know, my direction to the engineering was, you know, they asked, what do you need the camera to run for on these little batteries? And I said, 1.5 hours. You know, that's the limit. And then it's like, oh, Jesus, you know, that seems like a good minimum, because those red volts on a DSMC 1 lasted for like 15 minutes. And you're just like, this is such a pain in the ass. It's nice to have as a hot swap if you have another battery and you take it off, and then you can, you know, that little battery can act as just a hot swap. But beyond that, you don't want to get stuck out actually shooting with those things. So I kind of made the stretch saying, okay, 1.5 hours, that's a great target. And I was saying for both, like in my mind, I was like 1.5 hours with 2 batteries on there, that's great. Our rock star engineers are like, oh, it's got to be 1.5 hours each battery bay. So let's change everything and really work on this camera. And yeah, it took a little bit extra time, but suddenly we got 3 hours on 2 of these little Canon batteries, which is, I mean, you know, most of the other little cameras in this field, you know, if you're not overheating, you're lasting, it's minutes, you're measuring in minutes. So that was a nice little achievement, but it all kind of relied on Canon making these great batteries. And those batteries are phenomenal. They really are. And there's no weird, like, oh, it's Canon, we have to have our own logo on it, just like KipperTie. You know, you making your mount, or Foolcontrol, like, it doesn't have to be ours. It's like, what's the best solution? Let's ask them if we can do it and go forward, because it's the best. If you just look at this as a customer, and all of you would probably have the exact same reaction. If you didn't work for a company and said, okay, you get to build your own little camera, what parts would you do? It would probably be a collection of different things from different manufacturers. So that's what we went all in. Same with media. You know, we went all in with just, let's choose what the best at the time is for the camera, and that's kind of what you see. And I have no problem looking at my camera and seeing, you know, the Canon adapter on the front, Canon batteries on the back, because I love Canon. Canon's done a great job to our entire industry for years, and they're coming back strong now. They were sleeping for a little bit, but they're coming back with a vengeance, and I love what they're doing. And I've been a Canon glass shooter for my entire life, so, you know, you've seen, I've made the Raven, had all you could have was a Canon mount on it. So, you know, I like to say, hey, let's just choose the best. And Canon's got some really nice stuff they're working on right now with this entire new infrastructure. And this world has changed where trying to do this all independently, it's not a good idea anymore. All our little camera groups have to come together and, help each other out. So
no, the specialization is, is a really big deal. I wanted to, just to make sure I don't get totally off track.
Stop me if I'm talking too much. Stop me, please, because
I will let you talk until you say something you shouldn't.
Probably already have. I know you're waiting for that.
Yeah, Mikael, can you? There's something really obvious to anybody who's used Foolcontrol. Just looking at the screens we've got either side of you there, which is the one thing that it really, really needed before, and it has now, which is we actually can see the picture. What else is different? What else is new with the way that's set up for Komodo? Because I know, you've had to
what's different first is that the camera now has a Wi-Fi antenna, which it didn't have before, except the Ranger. So it makes the Wi-Fi much more robust, and you can change that antenna, put a bigger one, and you also have 5G networks now, 2.4 and 5G. So yeah,
there's the antenna. That was a big change in development. Yeah.
So that's a big change in terms of reliability of the Wi-Fi connection on set. And I haven't tested like very far, but it looks like it's much more robust than what we had before, just with that small antenna. And just transit to that. So obviously, if you're familiar with Foolcontrol, it looks familiar, but it's different. It's all square based. So because the camera was a little square, I thought that I reshuffle the UI and let the user also change the user interface, so they're able to change the buttons. And obviously, since we have this video preview, we needed to have like a landscape mode, so you can have the same user interface in landscape mode. And if you click on the image, it will go full screen, and from there you can just shoot with that as a monitor. Even though it's has a bit of latency, it's still quite usable as a short monitor. And if you double tap on there, you still get some control on the side while you're in landscape mode. So if you want to keep your phone on your camera, you can use all the app. You don't have to go back vertically at any time. You can go into the menu. You can control your focus. Everything will be working in both directions. So I go back to the vertical mode. And what I added, because like if you don't want to have the iris there, or if you don't want the ISO, or you prefer to have a different layout, now it will be possible to just double tap on a button and assign something else. So let me just show you quickly. You have like different pages with some buttons that are set up, but nothing is permanent. So if I just like double tap there, it will pop a list with all the buttons that the app and the firmware can display. So this will evolve as Red adds more feature in the camera. There will be more stuff, but you have different styles of showing the battery, or different thing you can search. Obviously, there's a search there. So if I'm looking for some lens tool there, I can type lens, and it will like filter that. And let me just get the iris, and I double tap, and now I've got the iris there. And then any button can be just, without opening the menu, you can just like slide up and down, and we'll change live. And you can also open the menu like you did before and change your value like this. Let me go back up. So the whole app is now fully user custom. You can customize everything you want if you don't like the layout. And you have like the same feature that you had before in Foolcontrol for focusing, where you can like put some marks and ask the app to rack focus, so it can do it slowly or with different curves and different I had the opportunity to work from the ground up and make a new version of my app. So since I was a better programmer now than I was 5 years ago, I took the opportunity to add features and see what we could do. So yeah, it's the same thing. You have the whole menu, you have focus control, but I added stuff like iris control now with the wheel, so you can also put some marks on your iris and do some rack iris change if you want with your EF lenses. And We have stuff for LUTs also, where you can preview your LUTs, and let's apply a LUT on the stream. So now my image is in black and white, and if I go there in full screen, you can trigger the autofocus from the screen. I mean, I'm trying to replicate as much as you would be able to do without access to the camera.
An interesting point, I know this is me being a geek, is that obviously remote from the camera can mean really remote, can't it?
Yeah, because but that's possible also with the previous generation of camera. But if you just take your camera, put it on your router, then if you open the ports from the outside going into your own network, you can control the camera from anywhere else. So on the DSMC1, or DSMC2, you had to open one port to be able to control the camera. Now you have to open 2 ports to be able to get the video feed and the camera. And you can have like multiple camera in a studio and being able to control each of one individually from the outside if you want to.
And it's not, it doesn't have to be a single point-to-point connection. I mean, obviously, I know the camera's only got a certain amount of horsepower and a certain amount of bandwidth to feed stuff. But if you need one person to look at one thing, somebody else to look at something else, it's possible to connect more.
Yeah, that I'm not sure yet if it will be the case with the Wi-Fi, because on the GSMC cameras, you just can have one connection at a time with Wi-Fi, but you can have up to 8 and Gigi. I don't know at the moment. It's I'm able to connect 2, or I haven't tried much more, but you can connect several devices, but I don't know with the video stream what's happening there and if it will stay in the.
Yeah.
I was asking Mikael whether we could just give one device to the AC and the other device to the director that's just on set, and that'd be fantastic.
I mean, I think the point is that there's clearly going to be a lot of scope for this stuff. The fact that the camera is set up to provide the feed, and to provide external control. Yeah, that's we're right at the very beginning of that journey, I guess, right now. And there's going to be a lot of scope for that.
The firmware. You've done a great job, because I haven't used the app and I've used Foolcontrol before. It feels so very much integrated with Komodo. It feels like it's been built from the ground up. So it feels on the shoot I did with London, I didn't have the app, so all I was working with was a very tall assistant, Bryce. And
there's one. Oh, sorry.
An EVF. Sorry, and all I had was an EVF. So it was tricky. when I used the app, that was just to blow me away. Yeah.
It's real. Just to demonstrate how much of a machine this man is. The backstory to, and he just showed it briefly there. The LUT manager. There was when there was the Frame.io had this thing on Sunset Boulevard here in LA when they were kind of demoing. It was a little intimate group of people that they were demonstrating their to the cloud service that they've been working on, and LUTs were a big part of it, and this real-time kind of shoot to edit, some really cool stuff that they're doing. And I remember going to the parking lot and thinking, because you're kind of limited on what you can store on a DSMC2. On the Komodo, we have much more memory. So I text Uday, who's in charge of our engineering, and I'm like, how many LUTs, how much room can you give me for LUTs? Because we're going to need a lot of them. And he's like, oh, you can have 180. And I'm like, oh, 180? That's good. He's like 180,000. And I'm like, oh, shit. Okay. But immediately I'm like, nobody's going to put 180,000 LUTs in their camera, but you could have a lot where it starts to get really, really confusing. And I'm like, holy shit, how are we going to manage this? The next text from the parking lot was to Mikael saying, hey, we should think about making a LUT manager, maybe it's a separate app, or maybe it's something, da-da-da. And, I think I got to, let me think about it. Went back into the Frame.io thing, went home. By the time I woke up, he had a video. He sent me a video of inside Foolcontrol, this LUT manager. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this literally was 8 hours later. And I'm like, man, this guy is just incredible. And you can see that, you know, see how powerful that is to have that community there, because he was solving the problem that as a shooter that he needed to do. I saw it as a, you know, with this frame IO thing, and that stuff just happens. And as fast and fluid as Red is, and as awesome as our company stays nimble, there would be 15 meetings on, you know, what is a LUT manager? Why do we need it? Da 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 da. Check all the boxes. Who's in charge of it? Blah 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 blah. Whereas this way, and I know it's the same as you guys, you know, with the long take. Hey, you know, we got a client that needs a 2 terabyte thing. It's like, dude, I can't do it. It's going to take me 4 years to test that and get that out. And he's like, oh, you want me to do it? John asked, and I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Well, should I ask for permission? I'm like, dude, you just got it. Go running. And, you know, very quickly. I mean, you guys obviously took your time and tested it properly.
Yeah, but
and,
it's a different thing. You know, there's different scales of organization, and you guys at Red are in that intermediate zone.
Yeah. I'm still on the cowboy from California. I don't care, and I don't listen to anything, and I'm just locked in my little stage here doing stupid stuff. But the other side of Red absolutely is a very process driven, because you have to be, you know, this is, everybody needs to be in this organization and march to the beat of the drum, and we meet in the middle, literally. And it's a beautiful thing, because we get to bypass when it's important, and when it's not, and the stuff I'm not good at kind of happens. And, you know, I'm sure it's happens with you guys too, to smaller, not with Mikael, because he's there doing it all himself, but it's the same kind of thing. And it's such an easy thing to lose. It's such an easy thing for a company as you start growing to just turn off the, let's not talk to the customer directly, let's not do this, let's be more process driven. And, you know, it's more profitable probably, but it has to follow the traditional development timeline and everything else associated with it. And, you know, we're just fortunate where we get this kind of, you know, dual-sided benevolent dictatorship where we can, you know, change the important things for you guys, because you guys have family. And I tell this to my staff, I spend more time with the customers, with my customers, with our customers, than I do with our staff. And I don't think that'll ever change. And I think it's important, but you have to have both. You know, you can't just have one side or the other. And we're in a good groove now where we have that balance.
Yeah, I mean, the third party program, from our perspective, I like the fact that there are portions of that which hold us to account, because a good proportion of what we want to do, you know, we want to make sure that we're providing quality. We want stuff to be really good, because a lot of the time, you know, the reason that we might start a concept process is that we're not satisfied with the status quo. And it's no good just saying, okay, well, here's a half-baked solution. If we're going to offer it for sale, if we're going to use it ourselves, I want it to be bang on. So the more formalized kind of third-party process that we've got with you guys now, yeah, I like the fact that I can say, I've got this idea, and you know, what the guys really want is, well, write that up for me, show me how you really mean to do it, get us prototypes, show us things. And a lot of the time, you don't know whether you've got an idea right until you have to explain it clearly to someone else. And at the point where you can clearly express it and it's a fully formed idea, you know, it's actually helped our process a lot as well. You know, I mean, the speed that we're able to do stuff because we're really small. So, I mean, this RF to PL revolver, you know, in terms of getting an initial prototype made, you know, we from the point where I finished working on the first round of the CAD to having something in my hands was like 3 days. You know, we work with prototyping companies. We have our own CNC guys very close to us. Yeah, we can make stuff happen really fast, but the iterations that we want then to go through and that we work with the guys at Red to go through mean that you know, everything just gets drilled down and refined that bit better. And it was interesting. Just recently, I did a little bit of in-house training with one of our staff members, basically going through how we design some of that stuff. And there are several steps along the way where I would look at it and go, okay, what we've got to now is a functional component. It does the thing that it needs to do, and a lot of people would leave it there. But that's, as far as I'm concerned, it's 20% done at that point. If it works and that's all it does, we're maybe 20%. It's got to feel right. It's got to look right. It's got to, it's got to have all of the right qualities. So yeah, it's another part of sticking to what you're good at.
Yeah, and support, and it reflects. And I love that the gauge of that success comes from the community. I mean, if you make a shitty thing, you're going to get beaten up, and we've done that a lot over the years. And you have to know what to make and what not to make. It's one of the reasons that Matt and I started GDU, because Red has to make accessories for such a diverse kind of market, and you have the risk of actually not making something really good for anyone, because it has to kind of work for everybody, and that can be said about a lot of things. So we always, both of us, shoot all the time, and we're like, I need a handle, or I need this thing, or I want to go, let's just make it for ourselves. And we literally inside stage, we have the, let me see that, we have the bridge port there. I don't know if I'm going. We got CNC up there. All the GDU stuff is, I'm pointing that way. This is a horrible demonstration, but there's a big military tent there where all the GDU stuff is assembled, and you can move so fast when you're just doing it yourself, and you have the capability to do it yourself, and you go through the prototyping phase is the best part of the speed. And then that's awesome, but then to say, okay, we made this little thing, then give it to Red and say, hey, can you test this, put it through environmental and all the cool stuff that Aaron and his manufacturing team can put it through Roja and through environmental and the heat booth and the stress testing and all the little machines. It's awesome to have both. And we give that kind of to you guys, where you get the idea, you make the prototypes just like we do here, and then we help you that end mile, saying, okay, give it to us, we'll test it for you, we'll make sure that the electronics is, you're not going to blow up cameras. There's still a lot of people that just bypass that step for some reason. But for you guys, I think it's very valuable, because it's that nice little, it's not the important step at all, but that verification and just that vote of confidence that, oh, we're not going to harm the camera or harm our product, and it's going to fit, is great. And yeah, of course we don't charge you guys for any of that. It's not that expensive to test your stuff, but I think that it's something unique that, again, without you guys on this call, we could have never done. We got lucky because the 3 or 4 guys that I started the third-party program with, half of you on this call, knocked it out of the park. Trust me, if we chose some of the other guys and it was just a bunch of, cameras starting on fire and things blowing up, that third-party program probably would have ended really quick.
Yeah, that could have got wound up very quickly. I mean, an interesting part of it for me is that, we've all come to it from from the camera side and from the creative side. Mikael's not a coder. I'm not a 3D designer. I'm not a product engineer. We've all got enough skill to make our way through that process and get something done. And I'm eternally thankful that we live in a time where it is possible to just download the right software, connect with the right prototyping process. That stuff is accessible to us. But yeah, if I was just an industrial designer by trade, you know, we wouldn't, this stuff wouldn't exist. It wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It has to come from the heart. It has to come from what you actually need. I had a couple of questions that I just want to ping back at people. So we had a couple of people asking about ND with Revolver, whether it's different having ND behind the lens or ahead of the lens. There's a good reason for having glass behind the lens. In a lot of cases, it is beneficial, but it's got to be high quality. You put poor quality glass behind the lens and you screw your image very fast. But there are long lenses out there where, you know, the opposite is true. You might find that, you know, there are always exceptions with optics. I think the whole point for us is that we provide an option. And I guess, you know, I mean, Gerald, I appreciate your input on that, but I mean, obviously lots of people over and over will say, where's the internal ND? Why isn't it there in the camera? My take on it is, if that was there in the camera, you're stuck with it. You get what you're given, and you're inherently making a compromise before you even start. You know, when you get to choose, just like you would choose a lens, you know, you get that flexibility back.
Absolutely, and it's the same thing with the mount, you know, the interchangeable mount, which we did with all the way back to the Red One. I think before anybody really did it, and it's that flexibility, you know, the modular aspect. Even though the Komodo isn't that modular, since that flange depth is so short, you can afford that, and the biggest benefits, you know, you also have to worry about size of camera. And yeah, we could have put an internal ND in there, but the camera would have had to grown. And this camera had a very, very specific requirement for size where we just couldn't do that. And for a lot of people, it's not a requirement for the way that they're using the camera. So the best solution is, if I need it, hey, call you guys and offer the solution. And again, it's just like you saw with those internal OLPFs that we made. You guys did it better. You guys did your version of that better than we did, because you're specialized in that and you're specific and you have way more time. You know, when we're making 500 SKUs on different products, we only have so many people that we can focus and spend the time on OLPFs until that engineer has to go off and, you know, worry about something else, where you guys can kind of carry along that path. And
we get to live and breathe one little component of the system. And yeah, I mean, I would be very reticent to try and take on an entire camera system. It seems unfathomably complicated to me when I know how much effort we put into like a section of the process. And yeah, it does, like you say, it means we can do, you know, we can really refine stuff and we can pay really close attention to it.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, that really is I think that's the best. It's as close to a community product as you could possibly get, when everybody has their hand in stuff, especially it's why I released the mechanical dimensions of the Komodo before even the camera specs. You know, that was on purpose. And I own an accessory company and a camera company, and that I would, you know, I'm giving away this information to potential competitors. But that's not what it's about, because I know you guys will make better stuff than we can, and stuff we didn't even think about. And you'll see that now as the Komodo gets closer to normal production, and you're seeing it every day now. There's all these accessories coming out from a lot of people, where in the past, back up 10 years, we kept that stuff, you know, we were horrifically protective about that stuff. We wouldn't give even bolt locations until after we were shipping the camera, and that was wrong. You know, then everybody has to play catch up, and the shooters suffer because they get this brand new camera and there's nothing that works for it yet, and it's not a good experience. So I love that I'm seeing a whole bunch of different companies, both good and both bad, come out with accessories for Komodo before anybody can actually do it, because you have time. You have 3D models of Komodo out there where people are printing on their 3D printers and testing this stuff. And I think that's awesome. I think it's rad.
at our own scale at KipperTie as well, I would really want to do my best to emulate that, because again, there are things that we don't, we know we don't do well, and places where the economics are, we make stuff here in the UK. The economics don't work the same when you're making stuff in other parts of the world. So I would definitely encourage other manufacturers, other accessory companies. It makes sense for us to collaborate on stuff. If you make a bracket and I make a different bracket, and they could, mate together and play well, why not? We're just helping each other. We've turned that into a sale for each of us, not a sale for only one of us, and the other guy's part didn't fit.
Absolutely.
So,
no, I love it. And we're definitely following that down to even, we made our own custom rosette pattern back in the day. And, we've changed over, to the standard, because it's like, why add the difficulty, why add the complexity? It's just not worth it.
Yeah. Couple of other questions, things coming in. I'll just ping to you, Jared. The shallow flange depth on the camera means obviously the sensor is a little closer to the action than it has been in the past. In terms of cleaning the sensor, cover glass, that kind of stuff, how accessible is that, especially given we don't have an interchangeable LPF that you could whip out and clean? How are you finding that?
It's actually, the red one was horrific. But it's on the Komodo, it's much easier to actually get in there and clean because of the shallow flange depth. You can actually, without taking, before with the DSMC 2, and you'd have the mount on there, and yeah, you could take the mount off and you're kind of really close to the center and you can clean it. But a lot of times, if you're on set and you're shooting, you don't have a lot of time, you just take the lens off and you're sticking down a little port trying to get that little booger off the, exactly, with the thing. That shallow flange, it gives you opportunity, of course, to get it more dirty or dirtier, but you also have, it's very easy to, I don't know if you've tried it yet, but to take a swab and go down, because that cover glass is so close to the front, you're not digging in and you can see and you have visibility. So I think it's actually better in a lot of ways. Yeah, no,
I agree. It's another aspect of that. We get asked about it quite a bit with the filtration in the revolver cartridges. People saying, "Oh, well, isn't there dust going to get in? Are you going to have issues with cleaning?" What we try and point out is that a piece of glass that is easily cleaned is far better than a piece of glass that stays away from dirt, because the dirt will get there somehow. And with these things, it makes people cringe, but I would quite happily rub those on my shirt. The coating on the glass means that it just comes straight off. Obviously, there are some restrictions on how you might do that, but I still kind of stand by that philosophy. I would much rather have optical elements that you can clean safely and easily than have something, an enclosed locked down system where you can't get at it in the hope that it won't get dirty. Because the way that people want to use Komodo, I'm sure they're going to get really dirty.
Everyone's had an experience of not being able to clean their EVF because they can't get into the optics.
Yep. And trust me, that, as sealed as that thing was, stuff is going to get in there. It's the world we live in. Even on, very clean sets, it's just that dust. And you have, you have you have EF too. That's attracting dust particles to these things. So it's going to find a way there. So let's just make it so you can get at it really quickly. And for the most part, everything on Komodo is kind of accessible like that, which is good.
So in terms of accessorization with Komodo, obviously there are there are ports, some of them super obvious, some of them hidden away. There's a lot of speculation going on there. Are we likely to, I mean, I asked this question knowing half the answer. A lot of that stuff is going to be accessible for third parties once the protocols, once the plans are fully implemented. What's your vision in terms of, right now people are using, small HD monitors, whatever they might have. With Mikael's software on a mobile device, do you see that becoming like a totally integrated regular part of the process, or where do you think the balance is going to go for most people?
Great question. I think that the capability of that little, those top pins, they're not just a monitor pass through and power like it was on the DSM-C2. The capability there is pretty incredible. And I think, we make a lot of cameras for other companies for really crazy applications that some are like the Facebook big ball camera, and some that are private. And we get to put a lot of these cameras together and network them together. And I'm not a VR guy at all, but I understand, computational imaging, and I'm a big fan of that, and linking these cameras together. So there's a big part of that in terms of monitoring. We have that little monitor on the top, and it's actually it's a great monitor on the top with a high resolution, and it's surprisingly more useful than I thought it would be. So just alone as the camera, once we have autofocus actually working, you can use that as a finder. Just like, when, and there's absolutely no mistake on, where this camera, if you look at a medium format camera, it's kind of looks the same. And you had a very big image with this little finder on the top. I really like the potential of what that does, but when you start adding monitors like the small HD and all the others, that's another example of what we just talked about, is other people doing better than we can. And, we made monitors for the DSM-C2 and the Red one, but holy shit, they're expensive and not as good as something that you look at a company like a lot of these monitor companies, and that's all they do. You have the Adamus, you have the small HD, you have the Portakey, you have all these things that's all they do every day is make monitors, and that just works. And you have to, because there's not enough power to cut from the camera to power all that stuff. So the capabilities from monitoring is there. And then you have, you got like the handle, this is the red handle with the little button where it uses the pins, very basic. But then you have the Komodo link, which I don't think anybody's really seen before, but you have this thing with the USB port there that connects to the pins, and it opens up a lot of potential, not just for the obvious stuff of like dumping off your recording to an external USB-C drive, but you can start using USB specific Ethernet adapters or connecting devices, and it just kind of expands. And the protocol inside the camera is it's one of the and focus still. I think I just screwed my focus. I think that it's one of the great things that we actually got from the hydrogen program, even though we were completely separate companies, is we kind of made some of those relationships, which gave us the ability to leverage the cell phone industry and CSI and some of the protocols to get into the camera and do a lot of really cool things with data and with connecting these cameras that we're going to rely on third parties more than we ever had before. We don't want to do everything ourselves because there's companies like everybody on this call that do something better than we could, because we would be learning from the beginning. So why not let everybody else do it? So yes, we definitely will be letting that protocol out. We don't obviously want to do it too early because it's changing every day, and we don't want people, that's the big, and I know it drives you crazy, John, is that you're like, what's this? What's that? What does this port do? What does this pin do? And it's like, well, it's changed 6 times in the last 5 weeks. So I don't want people working on stuff in their own little bubble and then realizing, oh crap, Red just completely changed everything. And all my work for the last 6 months that I couldn't talk to you about, or you couldn't tell me about, gets thrown down. So it's finding that balance of what, but for the basic stuff, like I said, the mechanical stuff and most of the pinouts, the EXT port pinouts and the power pinouts and all that other stuff, we released way before the camera.
Yeah, absolutely. Fernie, can you just switch over? I know you've got a view there. We can take a look at the top of the camera, actually. Just take a little closer look at things there. Cheers. So one of the things that that I found quite interesting working with that screen was that despite its size, it's actually much more usable than you think it's going to be. It is actually pretty practical. In terms of, I don't know if you want to talk on this one or not. There are obviously lots of features that are not here yet at this point. Right now, we don't have a punch-in on that output to go one-to-one.
Yep.
And I know it's been a bugbear for a lot of people, how that behaves. We all have super high expectations coming from some other, devices that don't have such a long legacy. We want to just kind of go, oh, show me everything. Show me, So give me some good news.
I love all of that stuff. And, I posted on Red User this, and you guys are actually interrupting the interface meeting that I'm supposed to be having right now. But, what I said on Red User was this is a work in progress. And there was a lot of stuff that was a little bit janky and didn't work, but we front-loaded the development of this camera on this has to work what the camera was intended to. We need to put this on set as a crash camera or a utility camera or a DE camera and just turn on, press record, and have the SDI feed out and be as stable as possible. So all the other stuff like interface, like anamorphic desqueeze, the punch in, and even the meters, we've changed so much since that. Wish I could show you my build versus your build, but we've changed so much about that already. It's driving me crazy. But it's one of those work themes where I call it the fuzzy stuff. It's the important stuff, and especially for a lot of the market that's coming in from, the mirrorless or the lower end that's looking at this camera. All that stuff has to come, but it's not cemented. This is that's why I gave it to the community and the feedback, as I don't know if anybody's seen that thread, but people actually went in and created entire camera UIs. And I was like, holy shit, you guys, with some really great ideas. And it's like, we would never, I'm not going to think of most of that stuff. The engineers aren't going to think about that stuff. It just helps things move so fast. So a lot of the things and a lot of the complaints, or I guess lack of features, definitely will come. We're just working on stability as number one, because this camera, this camera's out and Matrix just got back in action again. And we have a lot of really big movies that these cameras are on right now shooting, and the last thing they want is a bunch of the I want autofocus to work and I want this and that and where's my little Mickey Mouse menus, and they just want it to be reliable. And so that's kind of the approach we're taking, is make it reliable, because you can bring in all the fun stuff after, which we've done I mean, that's the history of Red, is the software keeps getting better and better. You know, we weren't even supposed to have this. You know, it's another great thing. I hate saying great thing about COVID, but another silver lining of COVID is this wireless monitoring came way quicker than we thought it was going to be possible to get done. So we're adding that kind of stuff. And then, of course, handing it over to Mikael, who at the time when we turned it on, I don't even think he actually had a camera on with him.
Yeah.
And he figured it out without having a camera to test it on. I'm just like, holy crap. And that, I mean, talk about rewards. I mean, he got a camera, I think, the next day or a few days after that one. But that's the kind of stuff that engineering as the collaboration is. You guys get to say, hey, I really hate those new exposure meters, or I hate those, you know, audio meters there. Why aren't they over there? We can change all that stuff. That's probably the easiest things to change. We're just working on the hard stuff right now. So I know it's a pain in the ass, but it will come. Trust me.
I mean, honestly, you know, I've worked with early versions of your gear over the years, and you know, I'm fairly well known for being that guy who will do horrible things and break stuff. But you know, I'm not shy about pushing buttons and seeing what happens. It's
well, you have a camera.
You know, it's pretty hard to break, I have to say, and it's really, you know, had the same feedback. You know, Fernando using it as well. Yeah, it may be that at the moment things are relatively simplistic. However, yeah, it's just been working. It doesn't feel like we're you know, at a super early stage in that sense.
Yeah, the Epic had no playback for a year or two, or so, a year and a half or something. And here you have playback already that's super fast and toggles very quickly. So hopefully thing will come and be surprising again with new features.
Yeah, no, we're excited because it is an entirely new platform for us. So and a new sensor. So we get to explore and dig in, and the capabilities are really, you know, as cliche as it is, limited only by imagination, because this camera can do a lot of really cool stuff, which will help, you know, DSM-Z3 and all the cameras in the future, because this gives us so much more horsepower. I think we milked, obviously we milked what the capabilities of the DSM-C2 were, and you know, we have to start taking it out resolution choices and, you know, stuff that, because the memory was full. You know, we have to start taking stuff out to put new stuff in, and there's a certain point where you just have to stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Darren, I'm super impressed how quiet the camera is as well.
Yeah.
You strip stuff out, but it's so, I mean, I've had it shooting in quiet mode for like all the time. It has adaptive as well. I can barely hear it, even on a hot day.
Yeah, that's you know, and it's, of course, that used to be, there's a lot of things that we get, you know, skin tone, a lot of things is crazy that Komodo is the one that fixes all of this stuff. Fan speed was a big one that you always hear, oh, the fans are so hot, the audio guys hated us, it's so loud in Komodo, or in our previous cameras. And same with skin tones are so bad, what's going on? You know, I whatever X camera, Arri or Sony, or, well, usually not Sony, but always compared to somebody in skin tones. And Graham did such an incredible job with the color science on Komodo. Really, I mean, that's one of the, and I know people are talking about it, and I love it because it's with the worst footage that's out there from Komodo. It's some of the best skin tones this camera's ever seen. And I know a lot of people that know what they're looking at is like, oh my God, what just happened? Because finally they nailed it. And there's a lot of okay, you nailed it on a lot of those things, fan speed being one of them. And it's all, you know, it's all relative to finding the best solution. It's why that fan exhausts to the left. And it's like, oh my God, why is the exhaust blowing in my face? Well, your camera gets to run a lot quieter when it does that. So I made the decision, I personally made that decision. You're not supposed to shoulder mount this fucking camera anyways. I don't know how many times I have to say that. I know people will, but trust me, people that are using the camera as it was designed to are going to appreciate that. Wow, it's quieter and it runs cooler. And not even just that, it's more stable in that temperature. And the calibrations are more expanded. So the calibrations actually last on a much wider temperature scale too. And that's all connected. And you have to make those decisions on overriding the obvious for something that always has been fairly or unfairly saddled with us for our entire, camera building careers. And those are the two biggest ones. Well, the fan one really never really personally bothered me that much. I know the skin tones bug Graham so much, always hearing that. And there's a few other ones, some you've seen and some you haven't, that really lets us create this new platform going forward. Just getting rid of those things that people are like, I wish it could do this, or I wish it didn't do that. So,
yeah, I think it's important to say that I'm pleased to see that the black shade, having done one, only took 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, so. That's one of those things. And again, you just think, oh, it's just a faster processor in there, and it's not really that, or there's more memory, or there's so many things that the engineer have to bring together, and that's from the sensor, the stability of the sensor, the way that the thermal is designed to actually, ramp up and down and hold at certain temperatures. And there's probably not a lot of people that do pottery in this thing, but when you do pottery, you have a
creative community. I think you might be surprised.
Yeah, well, you get when you're making pottery and you're firing in the kiln, you have these cone temperatures and it's confusing as fuck. But it's these little, when you slow things down and when you can not just heat up, but you can slow down the cooling, you get the stability that literally creates art. And it's very much the same inside the camera. When you have more control and more stability with that temperature, you can do black shading that's not these huge swings, and it's fast, and you can store more, but you don't really even need to. But it seems so simple, but man, is it a lot. The engineers really outdid themselves on this one. You get to kind of see all of our experience over the last 10-15 years kind of come down into this camera, which is cool because it's such an accessible camera. It really is like the Red One in that aspect.
But what's fascinating, it's smaller, but it's both faster and better in many aspects. So it's like
it has all the fundamentals from the DCM2 with IPP2, and it's just
it's familiar, isn't it? I mean, that's another aspect. I know we've had I've had people asking about workflow, and realistically, it's if you're a red shooter already, workflow with Komodo is a non-event. There are 3D files. I have nothing more to say. It matches. It does all the things you think it's going to do. It's a very short conversation, really, as far as workflow goes. About the only thing that obviously there's been a little bit of confusion around the change to HQ, MQ rather than red code ratio specifically. It feels to me like we're biasing right now, at least, towards some fairly high data rates. But that's out of the box. DS72 camera will default to 8:1, which seems relatively low data rate compared to what Komodo's doing. I don't know if that's a conscious thing your end or.
Yeah. It definitely is, and it's not as simple as just 3 settings, because it's kind of a table. And it's interesting because you kind of, and I've heard this discussion a lot, and they're like, oh, they're doing it because lower end cameras have basically low, medium, high, and this is the camera for low end people, so they need to simplify it. But it really wasn't. There's a few people that really understood red code values. And when we started, it was, if you remember, you had red code 24 and red code 36. And it actually, it actually made sense. You know, you were, because it started with, you know, megabytes per second. It kind of lost that along the way, but there's a certain kind of, and I noticed this even a lot when we started in this lockdown and we had these more interaction and live questions over these solitary series video things we have. People, one of the questions that you just saw every 5 minutes was, what red code should I use? Should I use 10-1? Should I use 21, 5-1, 3-1? People were so confused over, I mean, people understood the goalpost to some degree, but there were so many choices in between that really you didn't need to have that granularity of dive in that deep. It just made sense to simplify it into, you know, do you need to record? It's the only reason you should select low quality is, do you need to record for a very long time because you have a limited amount of cards? Or do you shoot really high quality? The medium shouldn't even really be there. But, you know, people would probably revolt if we didn't. But it's really the decision, you know, you want to extend the length, or maybe if you're shooting something with not a lot of detail, you can get away with low for an extended time. But again, we're using on the DSMC2, well, all our cameras in the past that use proprietary media, that was fucking expensive. Now we're using these CFast cards, which are pretty cheap in comparison. You should just be shooting on high quality all the time, because you never know when you need to dig in and grab, especially stills. You know, stills is one of the big things to get from these. But you never know when you need it, and it's really affordable just to record at the best data rate as you possibly can. If that makes sense.
I mean, media is, to be perfectly honest, you know, once you're into backing up, storing it, dealing with it, it's still incredibly cheap at this point in time. You know, your price per terabyte, you know, if you do things the way we do, for example, these LTO copies and so on, it's still, I mean, I was looking back to a good few years back before this kind of revolution where we were shooting digibeta tapes and that kind of thing in the distant past. You know, just literally a 30-minute tape is costing you more per minute than it does to run the whole process right now, including your backups and everything else.
Yep.
So we've got spoiled, I think, to an extent, but yeah, it's really not a big deal to just burn through some more media. I know it creates, you know, some work, some administration process, but honestly, like you say, the utility of having you know, all of that quality there if you need it. I mean, God, we have an outrageous archive of stuff that we've shot, and you know, we go back to it, we use it, and the fact that it's there and in high quality and shot the best way we can is, you know, never fails to you know, to pay off.
Yeah, and you know, like I showed you the USB port where you can just offload to a drive directly. You don't even need a computer. You know, after you, but you have, it's so much easier. You know, you talked about tape, and I mean, forgetting about film for, you know, taking that out of the equation. You think about tape, and I remember, I still have a box of tapes in my garage, and you know, we reuse tapes because, you know, I can't even, they weren't that expensive. Some of them were, but you'd reuse them. And I go back and look at those every once in a while. And you know how you actually write on them what you shot. And then if you reuse them, which you really weren't supposed to do, but whatever, you'd cross it off and then, you know, tape over it. And I look at some of those things like, damn, you know, I wish I didn't tape over this, you know, reuse this, because man, that was a cool thing. And you know, some of these people aren't around anymore, and that would have been nice to have. We're very spoiled now where, you know, even just taking a mag and offloading it and, you know, storing it on a really cheap hard drive, we kind of get spoiled that, you know, I wish we could just record forever and not worry about it. But I don't think, you know, it doesn't get better than consumer cards, fast consumer cards with CFast, and then offloading to a cheap drive. It's cheaper than it ever, especially with us, cheaper than it ever has gotten before. So when you have red code and you have the raw, which a lot of people will understand just how good of a file that is. Before, if you have an RGB codec that's compressed or even ProRes, you're kind of like, okay, maybe it's not as important. It's really important when you have the fidelity of that image in that red code format that you can dig in and go deep. So every bit of data that you can throw at it is going to help. So why not just shoot it all as much as you can? Just buy some hard drives.
Yeah.
Only took 8 minutes to offload the media.
It's not a big deal, is it? I mean, the for clarity, I've had a couple of people asking about it. The that USB-C
that doesn't exist.
Yeah, doesn't exist.
Just by the way, remember that.
Indeed. I think from the point of view,
you're not recording to a drive while you're shooting. Is that the question?
No. Yeah, this is, I think, what people are wondering about, because obviously there are some cameras out there which will let you access, a recordable stream via USB-C.
It's a really interesting thing, and you can see. I mean, it's why and I don't recommend it, but we tested it early on, and it's why you can, we don't turn off the camera when you open the media door. The better way to do that is with the adapter that goes from CFast to a drive, to an SSD. That's the better way to do it, but it's still, you're relying on high-speed cables and bumping it, or bad connections or dirt. It's really, again, it's the media is so cheap. I know it's expensive to a lot of people, but it's so much cheaper than we're all used to. Just record to that, and then that USB-C thing that we're making will let you, after you're recording, offload off to a drive, and then then you can reuse your card. But there's even when we had remember we started on compact flash cards, and there's productions that would buy hundreds of cards and just not record on them, and and literally put them in a vault, and it's the cheapest thing they've ever done, by buying cards and only using them once. It's that cheap, where at that point it's cheaper than tape, cheaper than film by a long shot. And you just get to, it's the beautiful world we live in, where everybody else gets to push that technology forward, and we just reap the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of off-board recording, like you say, there's having flexible cables in between is a sucky situation. Nobody wants that. Like you say, vibration is another aspect. I mean, it's useful, I guess, for people to know that there are products out there. If you have a special situation, it's a SATA connection. It's not anything exotic. And if you need a special solution, I mean, I'm sure we'll probably look at something in the future, but it won't involve a flexible cable. That's the part of it that would definitely suck. I think we've probably eaten up a lot of your time, Jared.
I'm so late for so many things.
Yeah, I know. We appreciate it a hell of a lot.
But I love you guys, really. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Not at all.
We kept hearing emails during the chat, so maybe you have more cameras.
Yep. Absolutely. Exactly. Sorry, I had to put my thing off. But anyways, thank you guys. Really, like this group specifically, you guys are, I mean, you're making this better, not just for us, but for the customers. And I think everybody appreciates that. It's really important, the work you're doing, and I love it. So keep on doing it.
We shall. We'll do our best. And thank you, Mikael, for joining us as well. I think there's a strong possibility that we'll do a little more of this in the near future, where we'll dive into some more depth on Redcontrol, Foolcontrol, and into some of our products as well around Komodo. But for right now, given that, Jared, we were able to get a bit of your time, it was nice just to be able to shoot the breeze and see how everything is looking.
Absolutely. My pleasure, guys.
Cool.
All right. Stay
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes.